Hi everyone, welcome to the Circuit of the Americas. We've had qualifying today, we've had a sprint race today. John is action-packed really. Let's start though with qualifying. Lando Norris put on pole position. Was that unexpected, do you think, today?
I think it's been quite an intriguing day because, Lando, fourth place on the grid in the sprint, made a great start up to second, but Red Bull's been on it quite ominously this weekend. Max won the sprint, so it's back to that old feeling again, how it was at the start of the season. Let's not forget, Max hasn't won since the Spanish Grand Prix, so quite a significant moment for him. McLaren hasn't been as comfortable, but I think kind of went against the grain, and we'll never really know because George Russell's crash late in Q3 meant the yellow flags were out, so they all aborted the second run. Max was up in the first sector, but the Red Bulls were mighty in the first sector, so we can't be definite. And I think we didn't see the true potential of the Ferrari either, because Ferraris looked particularly quick as well. So I think Lando will be very, very happy, but he's got a big job to do tomorrow.
Yeah, he said it was the best lap of his life, which I think proves that they're having to eat quite a lot out of that McLaren, aren't they, at the moment, which comparatively to what we've seen recently, maybe that is a bit different. You mentioned there George Russell, we had a big shunt at the end there, fortuitously so for Lando. What happened there? What's the situation tomorrow? We know about Lewis potentially sacrificing as well, don't we?
Yeah, so Mercedes has been another baffling weekend for Mercedes. They came here with upgrades, been difficult time, I'm quite confident. Yesterday he looked fantastic in sprint qualifying. George Russell was second fastest. Lewis should have been on pole position, but got stopped by the yellow flags. So I think they came in today feeling, we're here, we're fighting for the win. In the race early on, George looked quite racy, closed in on Norris, but then the tyres went away and he fell back. Lewis's sprint race was wrecked almost before the start. I think there was some suspension problem, didn't click. Get to qualifying, pretty similar setup to yesterday, pretty similar setup to the sprint, and the Merc was nowhere. Both drivers struggled to get out of Q1. Lewis didn't make it, he had a lock-up, lost that time. Qualified 19th. That's the worst qualifying position of the season, disaster. George got through to Q3, but pushing too hard, went off into barriers at 19, so he's damaged his upgrades. So there's now some thinking in the team. Do we revert him to the previous specification, or Lewis has actually offered to sacrifice his upgrades to George to help him? I think what I understand, Mercedes don't want to do that. We work across two cars, that's quite a tough ask. But luckily for George, the regulations normally change specification. It's pit lane start, doesn't count for sprint race weekends. So as long as the team can show there aren't enough parts to stick to the same spec, George can go back to the previous spec and will take his grid slot.
We know Eminem's about to start playing over there, but it's a case, I guess, of real Lewis Hamilton, please stand up, because qualifying this year for him has been dreadful, hasn't it, really?
Yeah. It's just not clicked. There's been moments of brilliance at some races with particular when things click. And I think George Russell said it brilliant, when the circumstances are all right with his car. And I think it's it depends on the wind, depends on the track surface, depends on the temperature, depends on the setup, all these elements. When that clicks, they're fighting for pole position. If something changes, and conditions today were pretty similar, nothing's dramatically changed in that car, but for some reason suddenly it's back in Q1. I think it's one of the mysteries of this Mercedes car. And I asked George in the pen this evening, what is the answer? He said, we don't know. It's really strange.
That window is far too small though, isn't it, like you say, for all those things. Let's talk about Fernando and Liam Lawson. Quite a strange situation there. So during the sprint race, they're tussling for a position towards the back. Liam's trying to make an effort, obviously, trying to make an impression on his first outing for RB this season. Fernando seemed to take a bit of offence to that. Afterwards, came up to him in the pit lane, had a little bit of a chat. He said he was going to screw him, by all accounts, according to Liam Lawson, who was then a little bit of a tiff in qualifying where Fernando made sure he passed him on the track. Is this a bit all, storm in a teacup kind of thing, isn't it? But it's good to see Fernando with a bit of passion, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, I absolutely love, Fernando in the pen is one of those highlights because he always gives you great answers. So we asked, he comes across a little grin on his face, and the first question is, what happened with Liam there in that session?
Played dumb, didn't he?
What do you mean? I talked about the pit lane start, and he goes, oh no, I was thinking about the scrub tyres and all that sort of thing. It reminds me of that race at Indianapolis in 2007 when he's shaking his fist at the pit wall because he was furious about Lewis Hamilton and what the team were doing, and afterwards he was asked about it and said, I was trying to clean my overalls. It reminded me of that. I think I was annoyed by Lawson in the sprint, said battling too hard for 15th, 16th, I think at the time. So they nearly crashed on the straight, wasn't given track, enough kind of track as they battled through the corner at the end of the straight. So I think he was annoyed. You spoke to Liam, what was his response to it all?
I think first of all, you got to say this is a guy trying to make an impression, so I've got no issues with it. He seemed to, and I think summed it up in a way, said, look, I didn't get a penalty for that, so the stewards think I was okay. I think he was a little bit taken aback. He said, look, I've not just started a rivalry with the two-time world champion, he needs to get over it. Yeah. He'd had a bad race, maybe it was just, Fernando venting at him, I guess, maybe. But Formula One has this weird quirk, doesn't it? I wouldn't be surprised at some point tomorrow, even though they're racing at completely different ends, they've got different strategies and everything, they'll have a little bit of time on the track together. We always see that, don't we? So I won't be surprised if we have a little bit tomorrow where there's a bit more needle and we see a bit more of a continuation of that. Talking of the sprint race, we touched on it earlier on, Max Verstappen just seemed to get off that line well, the battle behind him, but he just drove off into the sunset almost, didn't he? Yeah,
I think the Red Bull looks good this weekend, but the Ferrari, I don't think we've seen its full potential yet. It's really, really intriguing. So, in qualifying on the medium, they were fastest. The soft tyre, that step forward in pace wasn't as strong. And I think there's a story also in qualifying today. They started back. But Carlos Sainz is, very, very confident about his pace. I think you spoke to Charles, didn't you? What did he say about
he thinks they can win. He generally thinks, he said qualifying, even if George hadn't had the off, he doesn't think they could have got near Lando and Max, but he thinks with the race pace they've got, they can go out and win tomorrow. And they were really racy in that sprint race with each other, with George. So I wouldn't put it past them. And I know Alex, who works with Autosport as well, obviously he's tipping Carlos Sainz for the win. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It would be quite an achievement from where he is, but a third place, you never know what will happen with those front two. I suppose another story we should touch on, away from the track, but one that's reared its head all weekend, is the bib story, or now what is hopefully the end of that story after the FIA earlier on.
Yeah, so obviously we came into the weekend, all the controversy over the bib adjuster. We had a media session today with Nicholas Tombassis, who's the FIA's head of single-seater matter. He's been kind of in charge of this. He first spoke to when the teams raised their concerns about this. He was the one in Singapore. He's been at Red Bull. He's inspected the car. He took the decision that they're going to put the seal over the adjuster just to make sure that it cannot be used. McLaren have been pushing for an investigation, wanting to dig deep, have Red Bull use this. But he said, to me, it's done. He says, I can't, can I be 100% sure it was never used? No. But can I state that to us the matter's closed? He said, yes. And he said, it's, there's no way they can go back over 2-3 years of what the team's been up to. People have talked about why don't you go through the part firmware cameras to see if they've done, but he said it's impossible because it's a tiny little adjustment. How are you going to tell when it was used or wasn't used? And I know we saw them using this huge tool in those images from yesterday, but you don't necessarily need to use such a big tool. And would you, if you had made an adjustment, would you be using something so obvious? So to them it's closed. We'll have to see what McLaren say now in terms of, do they escalate this? Do they, approach the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, and ask him to look into it more? Or is it now done? We move on and get back to racing? Just maybe what happens.
Hopefully. Any other business? I think a good shout out for Haas. They came here with some upgrades and they both double point score in the sprint, and of course in qualifying Magnussen gets through to the top 10 shootout. That's a good step forward for them in that battle in the middle where it is really close now. And you look at Williams were poor today in qualifying.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. That midfield battle's really spiced up now because Haas scored some points today, so moved ahead of, I think, RB in the championship. But perhaps more intriguingly for that little battle is Alpine have made except Pierre Gasly has the upgraded car this weekend. Big gap between him and Ocon, into Q3. Really, really kind of confident upbeat, wasn't he? I think you spoke to him, didn't you? Does he feel the good progress? Good step?
He said, I think at one point he looked at it and he was only 6/10 off pole position, which, that seems a lot. But for a team like Alpine, where they've arguably been for a lot of the year, maybe it's the fact they've gone for the McLaren papaya, you never know. But I suppose we're at a stage of the season where we're so late now, it's maybe surprising that these midfield teams are bringing so many updates, but they've got to for that constructors' positions, haven't they?
It's money. I mean, it's roughly. We've done stories in the past on the prize money. It's roughly $9 to $10 million depending on the formula. So there's a lot of money at stake, and it's always interesting this stage of the season because team bosses have been quite relaxed at the start of the year. Suddenly realise that if we score one more point, that's $10 million, and it can come down to the last race, and that's quite a lot on the line when it gets near the end. So I think there's a bit of spice to come yet in this championship.
Brilliant. Well, let's hope there's some spice out on track tomorrow. Thank you everyone for watching.